Welcome back to Unscripted Leadership. There's something that I keep hearing from leaders, and honestly, it's been sitting with me. It continues to sit with me. It's not just senior executives, it's managers in their 30s, professionals still in the first decade of their careers, emerging leaders who are talented, committed, and quietly running on empty. Many people are carrying so much more than what anyone around them can see. And what really concerns me isn't just the exhaustion that comes with that, it's what's underneath it. The chronic stress that builds quietly over time. We know what stress does to our bodies. The moments where even the most self aware, capable leaders find themselves reacting in ways that they don't recognize, snapping when they're meant to be calm, withdrawing from their teams who need them to be present, pushing harder when everything in them is asking them to slow down and take a beat. And that's burnout. That's dysregulation. Both are showing up every day and everywhere, not as a weakness, but as a signal that something needs attention. As an executive coach, I've had the privilege of working with leaders across industries at every level. And I believe deeply in the power of coaching to help people gain clarity, make better decisions, and create real change for themselves, and therefore, through that ripple, for their teams and their organization. But a question has stayed with me. Why do some leaders sustain that change while others really struggle, even when they have the insight and the genuine desire to do something different? That question led me here to a conversation about something that goes deep enough and wide enough, but is not getting enough airtime in the leadership space, and the role of stress, the nervous system, and the body, and how we are showing up as leaders. Because leadership isn't just about what we know, it's about our capacity to stay present and intentional when the demands around us keep increasing. And that's exactly what today's guest helps people understand and do something about. Dike is a somatic wellness practitioner whose work explores how life experiences, traumatic experiences as children or as adults, chronic stress, and patterns of adaptation shape the way we show up today in our work, in our relationships, in our leadership, and every other space that we show up in. Lauren, I am so glad that you're here.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy to be here as well and to have this conversation. So I am the founder of a company called Harmona Inclusive Wellbeing. And really at the core of what I do is help people to befriend their nervous system. And so there's really three lanes of work that my work lives in. And it's one-on-one coaching, through organizational programming and workshops, and then events, classes, things like retreats. And really, what somatic work is all about. Somatic comes from the Greek word that means of the body. So anytime we use our body, it's a somatic practice, right? So when we lift weights, when we walk, when we do yoga. But what differentiates somatic practices from somatic healing is that somatic healing is a trauma resolution modality. So essentially, this is a naturalistic approach to creating coherence in the body, because when we go through trauma, the body gets out of balance, it gets out of whack, right? And so it's a naturalistic way of putting the body back into balance. And it's really something that I don't think is normalized enough in our society. And so I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later, about what trauma is and why it happens and why we should normalize it. But really, my work is about really educating people around the need for trauma resolution and supportive modalities.
I love that. I always find that behind the work that someone chooses to do, and I know for you, this is not your first career, there's usually a story, a moment, experience, a realization that made you say, this is personal to me and this is what I want to do with my career going forward. So what drew you into the space and what led you to focus specifically on stress and regulation in the body?
Yeah, I think it's accumulation of my life experiences, right? So I've always been someone that has been really passionate about self-improvement and self-growth. And I've also always been very observant. And so just a little background of my personal history. I'm someone that has suffered from anxiety since probably the age of 6. And it was something that we didn't have language for when I was younger. So my parents would like laugh it off, right? Like I had siblings in therapy, but my parents just thought I was like, quote unquote, like thriving and didn't need it. And so I always kind of just pushed it down and just thought it was just like my personality, right? And then as I got older, it started turning into anxiety induced depression. So I'd have these like really good days and then really bad days. And now that I understand the nervous system, I know that depression is the next stage of anxiety, right? And so I had tried everything from talk therapy. I did ketamine therapy. I did breathwork retreats, and everything was like relief in the moment. And then I'd go back to my normal way, right? And so it just led me to really wanting to understand my body more. And so I think it was maybe on Instagram, I came across something that was talking about somatic work in the nervous system. And it was the first time I ever felt seen. And not only seen, but like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to guess why this happens or if it's intergenerational, right? Like, this is how my body's perceiving my life right now, and it doesn't feel safe. And so as soon as I started doing the work, it was literally life-changing for me. It was the first time I remember sitting on the couch and I was like, oh, this is how it feels to feel like good in your body, right? And so with those own experiences, it was like the next step was sharing it with other people because that's how passionate I was about it. And I think my experiences within corporate America and diversity, equity, inclusion work, noticing all of the relational things that happen in the workplace. Now that I understand the nervous system, it's like, to me, it's like 1 + 2 = 3. Everything makes sense. And all of these things we're trying to overcomplicate with strategies and different types of workshops. We're talking around the root of the issue, which is the nervous system. And that human behavior is an output of whether the nervous system feels safe or under threat. And we can really simplify that to improve things like communication, engagement, belonging, all of psychological safety, right? And so I kind of say that once I found this work, I couldn't turn back in the way I was viewing the world and viewing my relationships. And so, yeah, I fell into it, but I know I belong here because I love it so much and I've seen how the work has changed people's lives.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. And it makes the work feel so much more meaningful when you understand where it comes from, and how beautiful that you now get to use your knowledge and your experience to be able to help others. I want to ask you something I find myself really curious about. When someone asks, "What do you do?" beyond the title and the credentials, what do you hope they walk away understanding about the work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think the first thing I want them to feel validated in, right? Because a large part of healing, a large part of connection is feeling seen, validated, and heard. And I want them to understand that everything they're going through makes sense. All of their behaviors, even the ones they don't like, they make sense. And I think that a lot of people try to change from a cognitive place, but 80% of our behavior is happening subconsciously in the body. And it doesn't speak in words, it speaks in sensations, right? And balance and proprioception, like where we are in space and time. And so this is a language that you rightfully shouldn't know much about because our society treats us like heads on a stick. And so really, I would love them to walk away with understanding that life is really hard and most everyone does need support. Everything you're doing makes sense. And there's a way of working through the body that you may have not explored that could really be fruitful and really life-changing for you.
So powerful. I think that reframe is so important, and it connects to something I want to explore with you throughout this conversation. Where at what point would you say you started noticing this show up in how people lead? When did you begin to see this link between the nervous system regulation and how people show up at work and their relationships and in their leadership specifically?
Yeah. So I think it was more of like a reflection of like, oh, that makes sense, right? I think for me personally, when I was in the workplace, especially when I'm working with leaders, it was either like the leader was super supportive, or if I didn't resonate with them, they became the villain, right? So I could see in my own nervous system how, because of my past, someone had to be the villain and I had to be the victim, right? It couldn't be relational and like connected. It was something had to be disconnected and I had to be in protection mode, right? And so knowing that my boss that was short and choppy that just reflected his capacity. It was nothing to do with me. He was trying to protect his time and be choppy to protect that, right? Or the leader that was maybe a people pleaser and overly kind, right? That was their perception of being safe in that role and solidifying their role. And I think like if you keep on looking at all these different behaviors like overworking, perfectionism, it's everyone just frantically trying to stay safe and also trying to protect their own capacity, because capacity is, can I metabolize the stress in front of me? Or can I feel the stress in front of me? And a lot of us are avoiding that. And so we're going into these protective modes in order to just like make sense of the world. And so I think if we drill down on most workplace behaviors, it can be chalked down to patterns that our nervous system and brain has formed to make the world predictable and act in milliseconds. And again, it's deeper than like, let's do a workshop on imposter syndrome or on psychological safety, because we can intellectualize it all we want. But if there isn't a felt sense of that safety, right, and what it feels like in your body, it's just going to go over your head or not be sustainable. It's going to be performative, which is another form of stress. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it was more like reflective. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to start where I think a lot of leaders are feeling right now. Like from where you sit, what are leaders carrying that almost nobody is talking about?
Yeah. So I think it's to generally say that most leaders are leaders because they're high achieving, right? They have done things by the book, what capitalism and corporate America says is right. And I think by default, those type of systems allow us to measure our worth or encourage us to measure our worth based on external things. And so if you think about that, when I'm always doing something to be externally validated, that is a form of survival. Even if like I have all the money in the world, even if I have a perfect life, my body is going to survival mode because it's saying, if I don't do A, B, and C, I'm not going to be worthy. And that's my identity is tied to my survival. And so I think a lot of leaders are carrying an internal pressure, an internal kind of the ticking time talk, an internal dialogue, an internal inner critic that is hard to articulate. And they might not even have the words for it, right? But there's this urgency, there's this pressure, and it's energetically wearing on their nervous systems. And I think, again, it's hard to articulate because it's like, I have this great life. Everything is good. I'm making the money I finally want. But there's this tension, there's this constriction happening in their nervous system energetically that is wearing on their mental health or their physical health, their emotional health, their relational health, all of those things.
My gosh. Yeah. I see it so often. And what I feel like there's this pregnant pause before we start to see what now we're hearing as a lot of burnout and stress and how it's showing up, with leaders having that language. But I think it's going to evolve. This is my fear. And I certainly don't want to put it out into the world, but I think it's going to evolve in seeing more people with physical health conditions. Today, I'm sure it's happening, but I don't know that we have the language to make that connection. What are your thoughts and what are you seeing and how that's translating to the breakdown of the physical body?
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting because burnout is such a vague word. And even if you Google it, right, there's so many different types of burnout. But essentially, simply put, burnout is a defense mechanism of the body. It's saying, I'm collapsing, I'm shutting us down because we can't go anymore in fight or flight. And so I'm forcing you to rest, right? And so essentially burnout, you can think of it as a gift. It's like, I'm giving you all the cues in the world to take a break to rest. And if you can't rest, how can you integrate rest into your day? So little by little, you can start to recover. But all that to say is, yes, if you spend large amounts of time in burnout, the next step is the body starts to break down, right? Because if you think about burnout, metabolism slows, immunity lowers, your mental health deteriorates. Like all of these things are deteriorating the body because it's saying, wow, I'm really like in a shutdown state because there's a fear that's inescapable. So I'm going to start to deteriorate because movement isn't working, right? Getting out of it isn't working. And so that's the next step. And so I think when we look at a lot of, even myself, mental health issues, anxiety-induced depression, right? If you think about anxiety is fight or flight. If I've been living in fight or flight for too long, my body will collapse and shut down. Shut down is depression, right? And so we're giving labels to the natural, I guess, flow of how the body moves through survival states, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to be very specific on how to get out of it. Medication is good and helpful for people. But again, it's numbing all of the physiological cues that you're supposed to be in tune with to know that your body needs rest, to honor your body, right? And so that is a solution, but it's also a Band-Aid. I think when we're talking about all the biohacking, like cold plunge, sauna, even working out, all those things are amazing for your body and they're good and beneficial for your health. But those are coping mechanisms if you don't know how to be with the emotional charges and the emotional state and sensations of your body. And so I think a lot of the burnout solutions out there are that we're getting presented with are coping mechanisms, but not again getting to the root, because all of the rest in the world is not going to cure burnout if you're perpetuating patterns that are rooted in survival and fear of feeling the sensations in your body.
Yeah. I agree. I'm processing that very personally. Like this conversation um, is as much beneficial for me. I'm letting people come in and to have, to listen in and learn about, perhaps something that they need to uncover for themselves or people that they coach. I think there are a lot of us in the coaching profession that really don't know where to send our clients sometimes when it's beyond awareness. So why do you think so many leaders appear to be doing well on the outside while they're privately exhausted and very much disconnected from their bodies and from their nervous system?
Yeah, I think it comes down to performance culture, because if you think about it, being high achieving, being a high performer, again, you're externally focused on how you're being perceived. And so I think it makes sense that if you've always been focused on how you're perceived, showing that you're struggling, showing that you're upset, right, isn't something that's going to be part of the pattern that's brought you to where you are, right? And so I think that's what's really dangerous about it. And why, like, unfortunately, like you hear about the most happy people in the world committing suicide, right? It's because it's this, again, part of stressing about how you're being perceived is a stressor and part of the problem, right? Because if you were to honor your body and do what you'd like, you wouldn't be here. And so I think it's one of the outputs and one of the patterns of people that are high achieving, unfortunately. And I know from my perspective, like people at my lowest, people perceive me as this really friendly, outgoing, extroverted person. And to me, I didn't perceive myself like that at all, right? But again, it was like the concern how others would perceive me and wanting to be liked and wanting to be accepted. And I think that unfortunately, when someone's struggling, there's this silent battle and there's this loneliness and fear that no one will understand, which is why we need to have more of these conversations in the first place, because it's so much more normal than people think.
I agree. And I keep sounding like a 4-year old going, but why? But why? But why?
Mhm.
It's like, I think about, what is actually going on when someone understands the pattern completely on an intellectual level, but they keep having the same reaction anyway. And, the awareness of I'm in a culture that expects me to perform. I'm in a I'm in a role or an organization where I've signed up. So now that I'm here, I've got to deliver at all costs. Why do we keep repeating the patterns despite that awareness? And despite, in some cases, the fact that we are breaking down mentally and physically. Like that's my quandary these days, because I feel like I've had that aha moment for myself personally, and I'm still learning what took me there. I know my personal experiences that took me there, and I think looking back, hindsight's 2020, right? I keep going back to, if that thing didn't happen in my life that forced me to take a beat, would I have come to that conclusion of, let me take my awareness and alchemize that to action and change for me personally, for my family, and for the people that I now lead and support, in my business. It's just it's something that is, a constant work in my coaching. We're not supposed to tell people what to do, but it's, how do we get them to that aha moment on their own without them having a, you know breaking you down to your knees type of experience that forces them to say, I've got to do something different. So yeah. let's get a little deeper. I mean, not that we're not already deep in it right now, but because I think where your work becomes really important for leaders to understand is that for anyone listening who hasn't come across this before, what is nervous system regulation and why should a leader care about it?
Yeah. So, um, first of all, like, what is the nervous system, right? Because some people, I've had someone after a class say, like, can you just tell me what the nervous system is, right? And we have different nervous systems. We have the central nervous system, which you can think about it as our brain and our spine. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is basically our nerves and our neurons, and all like the cells in our body, right? And within this somatic work, we're working with the autonomic nervous system. Okay. And basically, the nervous system is a sensory mechanism. It is not subjective. So meaning like if I walk into a room already, what we call neuroception, I'm feeling whether I feel safe or not. And if I don't, mechanisms are going to go into place to make me safe, like bracing, maybe overthinking, right? Or I'll be relaxed and composed and I'll be able to like be my most authentic self. And so essentially, when we've gone through chronic stress or we've gone through trauma, the nervous system essentially cannot keep up with all the stress and metabolize it and process it. So it gets stuck in different responses. So if I'm always stressed at work, then my nervous system is going to go into fight or flight, or what we call hyperarousal, more often than not, right? If I go into hyperarousal too much, or if from my past I learned that fight or flight wasn't a viable or safe option, then I'm going to go into hypoarousal, which looks like freeze or shutdown. So being like severely overwhelmed or fatigued, right? Feeling powerless. And so because those two things can happen, going into constant hypoarousal or constant hypoarousal, the nervous system loses what we call its coherence or flexibility. Because ideally, throughout the day, we'll feel, regulated, and then we'll go into hyperarousal and then we'll recover. Then we might go into hypoarousal and recover, right? The goal is to never be in those states. It's to go to modulate between them. So what nervous system regulation is, and which is really not talked about enough and misconceived on the internet, I think people think regulation is just calming down. That is not what it is. Regulation is creating modulation within your system. So it's recovering and going in and out of states and not getting stuck in a singular state that is in survival mode. And so that is what this work is about. And that's why it's more complex than just going to a meditation class or taking deep breaths, because that modulation that was dysregulated because of years and years of patterns, it takes a lot of time to create that modulation in the nervous system.
You know, what's so powerful about what you shared is this misconception that when we are regulated, we are always in calm, which is probably unrealistic, which turns on our inner critic to say, why are you so frenetic? And why can't you be in this calm Zen mode all the time? When in reality, what you just shared is that we are supposed to ebb and flow. It's about not being stuck in any one of those positions. So, okay, well,
Yes.
since you're breaking down things that seem like the blinding glimpse of the obvious that we're learning so much about, then how does chronic unresolved stress, how does that actually show up in someone who's leading, especially
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. So it can show up in very different ways. And I like to say, like, demographically, right? Um, because of survival mechanisms, it can show up differently. So a prime example is when a Black woman is going through depression, she actually like loses sleep, engages in more like self-criticism, whereas like white women might want to sleep more and have less energy. So it all eventuates differently. But I can say, I can tell you some of the symptoms look like when it comes to each survival state, right? Because if we're spending a lot of time in fight or flight, that is a form of chronic stress. If we're spending a lot of time in freeze, right? And so fight or flight, it sounds just the way it sounds. I guess you could say. So fight would be constant anger, blowing up easily, getting everyone's the villain, right? Getting agitated easily. Flight would look like being anxious, right? Being avoidant, being dismissive. I don't want to deal with that. I'm running away from it. And so when people spend a lot of time in those states, usually we see things like high blood pressure. We see muscle tension because there's like a lot of constriction and bracing going on in the body. We might see a lot of keeping busy. So a lot of to-do lists, always on the go, always have to do something, right? There's an avoidance, but there's also this like accumulation of energy that just wants to like mobilize, right? When we look at the freeze state, So you can think of that as being like equal parts, what we call parasympathetic, rest and digest, and sympathetic, which is that fight or flight. And so there's like a stuckness because there's two opposing energies pressing up against each other. So with this, we might see a lot of people that feel stuck and overwhelmed, like they can't take a step forward, but there's all of this energy mobilizing through overthinking, right? They get overwhelmed easily. They might be highly functional during the day and then they get home and crash. And so it looks like I'm doing all this stuff during the day, but when I get home, I can't empty the dishwasher. I can't go to the gym, right? And they think they're lazy, but it's really because they're running on adrenaline and then the body is crashing. And then we also, in those states, see digestive issues, right? Because all of this energy that's been mobilizing through our limbs to fight or flight takes away from the energy it takes to digest our food. Things like headaches, feeling fatigued. And specifically in the workplace, you might see more isolation, like not wanting to go out to lunch, wanting to avoid meetings, wanting to avoid conversations in general. So that's just a high level. And again, it eventuates based on life experiences, demographics, all of that. But I think that's a pretty good overview of how you can expect to see those different things look in the workplace.
Yeah. And I think about, we throw a lot of personality tests and assessments of people, as part of coaching. And I think those are wonderful in terms of, giving people the opportunity to do some self-discovery about their preferences and how they might lead under different circumstances. But as I'm connecting that to your work, I think about things like perfectionism, over responsibility, meaning difficulty delegating. That's one of the things that comes up over and over in hyper performers that I coach, right? Is, they're exhausted, but they're trying to figure out, like, I cannot delegate. And, they tie it back to trust issues, which could very well be linked back to some kind of trauma, right? Where if I'm not doing it, then I know it's not going to be done right. But everything from, that to avoiding conflict, everything that you mentioned that can show up from nervous system deregulation, we see it on the coaching side more as sort of personality traits, and don't necessarily connect it to what could be happening with someone's nervous system that's causing them to show up in these ways that could be inhibiting their ability to lead. And in some cases, they're leading, they even look from the outside like really successful people, but then personally they're drowning in their own stress and burnout, to overuse that term.
Yeah. I think that's a really good observation because, again, like a lot of things we see as personality traits or flaws are actually just outputs of a nervous system and how it's functioning. And I think there's like obviously those tests are really helpful in how to support people in navigating those nervous system states. But it's like, how do we get to the root and help their system perform in a more authentic and safe way, right? Because performance is necessary to be in the workplace, but how do we recover from it? How do we embody who we want to be within that performance? It's like, those are the type of conversations we need to have more of, I think.
I agree. Well, and I want to be transparent about something before going any further. Like, I'm a coach. I believe deeply in coaching, and I don't see what I do as competing with what you do. I think it works alongside it. And I don't know that people necessarily see that. So maybe share a little bit about when leaders come to you after they've already done coaching or they're in the middle of coaching. What do you notice, and how do you begin to sort of leverage the information and the awareness and what they're getting in their coaching experience with how you can help them from a nervous system perspective?
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. We're not competing and we're both focused on different things, right? And so I think about leadership coaching and even talk therapy in the same bucket as you're working with the top part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain designed to strategize, rationalize, even self-regulation when you have the ability to do so. But my work is working with the brain stem, or like the most reptilian part of the brain, right? So the subconscious brain. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people that have been working with coaches, I even have leadership coaches as one of my clients. It's not feeling good in their body, having this constant dialogue in their head that won't let up. So I'm not doing it fast enough. I'm not doing it good enough. Right. And so they're still able to execute on what they're doing within their coaching, but they're not doing it from a place that feels good in their body. And so it drains them and leads them to that eventual burnout or fatigue. And they're trying to get out of that back to a place. A lot of them have had challenges not experiencing joy, which happens when you're always in survival mode, right? Joy feels unsafe because you're so you've normalized survival mode. And so just wanting to experience more joy in their life, more balance, feeling better in their body, but also starting to unpack some of those patterns that have made them or allowed them to succeed, but not in a way that's sustainable for their body. Like, how can I still go along this journey, but feel better in my body so I'm not breaking it down?
That's so powerful. And what do you see that shifts when a leader starts to pay attention to both their development and their capacity to regulate?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think faster recovery. So things that would like put them out for like, whether it's something that would make them angry or anxious, that would put them out for like weeks on end. Now they can recover in a couple of hours or a couple of days, right? And so
Yeah.
now their system is recovering faster, which means there's less stress in the process of going through it all. I think definitely time management. And so this is an interesting one because a lot of them don't think they have time for family, right? Or have time to take care of themselves. And it's really, again, because that rest and joy and pleasure doesn't feel safe. And so like really being able to like rest in pleasure and create more time for self-care, but also relational things like family outings. They're seeing more of that in their life, which is again, adding to the recovery. So they have more energy at work. And I think definitely just the lens of even the people they coach of seeing what sort of survival states they might be in and how can they better support them and how crucial it is for the regulation of their nervous system to support others. I talk a lot about the concept of co-regulation. If I'm a leader and I'm dysregulated, my dysregulation is going to be contagious to the rest of my team, right? It trickles down. And so a lot of these leaders are realizing, oh, if I'm really regulated, that's going to trickle down and create more trust. It's going to create more regulation and psychological safety within my team. And it really just, again, it changes the way work feels, which means work becomes more sustainable and more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really all what we're looking for. So I want to make this a little more tangible for listeners without sharing anything confidential. Can you walk us through a meaningful shift that you've seen someone take in this work?
Mm, yes. So one client comes to mind and she is a retired pilot and suffers from chronic pain. And she described her life as like, I think my life is pretty good, right? I've never complained about much, but I know after reading a whole bunch of books that my chronic pain is due to me suppressing my emotions. And it made sense because as pilots, you're literally trained to like not feel things and act on a drop of a dime without being over emotional about it. So everything that she was going through and everything she was, how every way she was responding made sense based on her training. But for her, the chronic pain was getting so bad and she had tried everything. She's like, I want to just start to feel better in my body and I want to start to process my emotions and see if there's a shift. And so we did a lot of work. We worked really, really slow to first and foremost just get her comfortable with like feeling emotions. Because at first she would talk about something and she's like, I can feel it cut off. Like I want to cry, but I just like feel, she would always go like this. She's like, I can feel my body just shutting down. And so we had to little by little get her comfortable. And that's what we had to do, titration to not overwhelm the nervous system of, can you feel that just for a moment? And that little bit that you're feeling, let it to metabolize to the body. So your body is holding on to a little bit less, right? Because all that suppression is energetically using resources of the body. It's breaking it down. And so little by little, we eventually got her to a point when she could cry. And for most people, that's like, oh, like that's a goal. But crying is what we call discharge of trauma. Crying is what metabolizes the trauma and allows the system to clear. And so we did a lot of work, and we started to uncover that a lot of what she was doing was people pleasing. And so a lot of family was over relying on her. She was, sending money to people that she didn't really want to, right? She was paying for services of people that she knew for a really long time. And she was afraid of canceling the services to hurt their feelings. Again, all of that stuff is like the suppression of her authenticity. And so we really put in place good boundaries for her. We were able to allow her to start to move energy through the body, which helped that bracing against her chronic pain, and her chronic pain decreased greatly. She was even like open to being in relationships where she like had sworn off men. And so for me, at the end, this is what she told me. She's like, work has been greater than seeing a psychologist for me. And I would never tell anyone to see me over a psychologist, but she was like, the way I feel in my body, I can't even describe it. The awareness that I'm picking up when I'm in relationship with people, I can't even describe it, but I feel like I have control of my life and my happiness, which is something that like has been transformational for her. And so again, someone that was a successful pilot on paper, she looked like her life was great and perfect, but inside she was really struggling with like creating balance in her body. And it was eventuating to that chronic pain because she was just constantly braced against everything. So that's one of the clients that I really, really
Wow.
enjoy talking about. Yeah.
And, for some people, we're in work environments that we're trained to, in essence, fix our body in such a way that we can do the job, but we abandon ourselves as human beings. We're in essence, we're abandoning our body in order to be able to do our job. So imagine someone that's been doing that for decades, successfully, but now the career is in the rear view mirror and life is in the windshield. And how do you unwind years of training to be able to enjoy life? So that is a powerful example, and good on her. I'm so happy that she found you because
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. So zooming out a little bit, I think about a lot of organizations that invest significantly in leadership development and yet simultaneously create conditions that make s- sustainable leadership almost impossible, right? That tension, especially today, and I'm not blaming it on organizations, it's the system, right? It's our
Mhm.
constant changing world that we're living in right now. I hurt for leaders who believe that there is no way out for them. And for some of them, it might just be a matter of changing roles or changing organizations. However, before long, they're going to find themselves in that very similar situation because they're bringing their own deregulation with them. And so it probably feels in many ways like a no-win situation. But I think about workplace culture and how it contributes to chronic stress and burnout, and what practices should we as coaches, and you as a somatic practitioner, what practices can we teach just in one session, that
Yeah.
says here's a way back to your body so that you know you can personally be able to just get through the day, because some of the people that I talk to are just literally struggling to get through the day.
Yeah. 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 And I think we have to make it as simple as possible because a dysregulated nervous system is severely overwhelmed. So if you're like, dude, this, right, is just going to overwhelm them and they're just going to freeze and
Yeah.
not do it anyway. And so I like to just do like what I call like micro movement snacks or micro things that you can do to integrate into your day and give a little bit of like reprieve, a little bit of recovery to the body. And so what we need to understand about the nervous system is that it thrives off of going slow, right? Even if like you were to really slow down right now, you'd be like, oh, I'm noticing like my heartbeat. I noticed like there's a tingling in my arm that I didn't notice when I was just like talking, right? And so as much as we can integrate like just slowing down, that's amazing. And so if you're a coach starting the session of like, how was your week, right? And they talk about their week and I see something good that happened, something bad. Can we just slow down on the good things that happen? How does that feel that you were able to do that, right? Like really slowing down and allowing yourself to feel the good. And then
Yeah.
when you say the bad, how does that feel in your body, right? And you don't have to be a somatic practitioner to like navigate the different sensations, but just letting them slow down and actually feel it allows the body just to like relax a little bit, right? I always say that the best way to kind of navigate your day is to create transitions between tasks. So say you're doing something for 45 minutes, you have another task, have some sort of transition between them. And what I like to do is just a simple side stretch, right? Because when you're stretching, you're helping to open up space in the body. Again, constriction when I'm stressed, I'm opening up the body.
Okay.
Another thing that I like to do is to orient. So using our eyes and neck to look around the physical space. because what we know about stressed and traumatized bodies is that they are orienting to either the past or the future. And so if you can use your eyes, that's the first thing animals, we have animal bodies do when they sense threat, they orient to see that they're safe, right? And so just by orienting, the body starts to drop. You might even notice a deep breath, right? Those are things you can do. I think another thing to do during the day is just get up and like shake a little bit, right? Again, think about you're an energetic being, and energy either becomes stagnant, either comes really hyper aroused, so you can't contain it. But most of the time we're sitting all day, the energy's stagnant. So you want a way to like gently mobilize that energy and move it to bring some balance into the body. And so I don't know if you can see, oh, you can't see it. I have a walking treadmill. I walk during meetings, between meetings, right? Just mobilizing that energy. And I think lastly, something that's underrated is when you get home from work or you're done with your day, just laying flat on the ground and just letting the body unbrace. Right? Because even sitting right now, there's constriction happening for my neck to stay up, right? It's completely exhausting for the body to be constricted and upright all day. And lying down on a flat surface, not the bed, a flat surface like the floor, and just letting the floor support you is a great way for the body to recover. And for someone that's chronically stressed, someone that's overwhelmed, those steps are what's going to lead them to the deeper steps, right? You have to start somewhere, but you can't start with all these, go to cold plunge or work out 20 minutes, right? You want to do the small things that are manageable and accessible so that you stick with them.
Those are great. Thank you for sharing that. I think about when we can help leaders just to do even those micro efforts, when they're not running on empty, the impact that it has on their team. Because I think you said this earlier, when we are feeling, when our nervous system is up and down or stuck and dysregulated, we are walking into rooms and we're bringing that energy into rooms. So our teams feel that same energy from us. And so I think about, one leader at a time, I think we can change, the landscape of work today. And the work that you're doing is just amazing, Lauren. I'm so proud to know you and to be able to share this.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lauren, before we close, I want to ask you something I think leaders rarely sit with. What is it actually costing someone and the people around them when they spend years leading from a place of depletion and nervous system deregulation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I think what I feel called to say is it's costing them their aliveness. And so to be alive is to feel the full spectrum of emotions. It's to be vital. It's to be connected. And when we're living in a state of dysregulation, by default, the body cannot safely connect with others. And so you're losing that connection, right? You're losing that ability to make the impact that you were brought here to be. And so again, if you're surviving and you're doing okay and you're even, you might define yourself as successful on paper, great. But how much more impact could you be making if you're actually connected and feeling good in your body is the question to sit with.
So powerful. I agree. Well, for listeners who want to go deeper, where can they find you, learn more about your work, or take the next step?
Yes, so they can visit my website. It's harmona.co. There's no M, so Harmona, HARMONNA.co. I'm also on LinkedIn under Lauren Dike. I share a lot of content and like things around my speaking and all of that. And yeah, you can book a discovery call, but just check out the website and see if anything appeals to you. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out in the contact form. But would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you. This conversation has expanded how I think about the body and how it impacts our ability to lead when we are connected and regulated within ourselves. And I am so excited to share this work with others. And we'll put your contact information in the notes as well, so that people will be able to find you easily. And burnout isn't a senior executive problem by any means. It's relevant to the work that I do. So I connect it to that, but we are hearing it from people who are just starting off their career, which is a scary thought to me. And so this is a conversation that we need to continue. And thank you so much for being part of this episode. And I can't wait to host you again and to share more stories and experiences from you and to hear from Drake.
Thank you. It was a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Lauren. All right, take care. Thank you so much for spending this time with us on Unscripted Leadership. This conversation reminded me that leadership is deeply human and that the way we show up is shaped by so much more than what people can see on the surface every day. I am glad for the honesty, insight, and care that Lauren brought to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And I hope that you leave with something meaningful that you get to sit with on your own time. And if this episode resonated, I'd love for you to stay connected with us on our socials, visit our website, and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, where you can find all of our episodes and never miss one. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people depending on your leadership. Be well.